The morning sun filtered through the glass windows of Elegance Boutique, one of the most prestigious clothing stores on Fifth Avenue. Sarah Mitchell adjusted the collar of her simple white blouse and smoothed down her black skirt, preparing for another day of work. At 28, she had been working as a sales associate for 3 years, always maintaining her professionalism despite the challenging customers she often encountered. Her salary barely covered her monthly expenses, but she took pride in her work and treated every customer with genuine respect and attention. The boutique was known for its exclusive designer pieces, attracting wealthy clientele who could afford $1,000 dresses without batting an eye. Sarah had learned to navigate the complex social dynamics of luxury retail, understanding that behind every sale was a person with their own story, their own insecurities, and their own need to feel special. She believed that everyone deserved to be treated with dignity, regardless of their bank account balance. As she arranged the new arrivals on the elegant mannequins, Sarah couldn't help but admire the beautiful fabrics and intricate designs. These were pieces she could never afford on her modest salary, but she found joy in helping others discover their perfect outfit. Her colleagues often joked that she had an eye for matching customers with pieces that transformed not just their appearance, but their confidence as well. The store's atmosphere was carefully curated to exude luxury and exclusivity. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over marble floors, while soft classical music played in the background. Every detail was designed to make customers feel like they were entering a world of sophistication and refinement. Sarah had grown to appreciate this environment, even though she sometimes felt like an outsider looking in. What Sarah didn't know was that Marcus Wellington, the store's owner, had developed a habit of arriving early and observing his establishment from a discreet corner office that overlooked the main sales floor through one-way glass. At 55, Marcus had built his retail empire from nothing, starting as a young man with a small shop in Brooklyn. He never forgot his humble beginnings and made it a point to understand every aspect of his business, especially how his employees treated customers. Marcus valued authenticity and kindness above all else. He had seen too many luxury retailers lose their soul in pursuit of profit, creating environments where money mattered more than human decency. His success had taught him that true luxury wasn't just about expensive products. It was about making people feel valued and respected. He often said that a store's real worth was measured not by its profit margins, but by the character of its employees. As Sarah continued her morning routine, she noticed a familiar tension in the air. Fridays often brought challenging customers, people who seemed to carry their week's frustrations into the store. She had learned to approach these situations with patience and understanding, knowing that sometimes a person's behavior said more about their internal struggles than their true character. The boutique began to fill with the soft hum of activity as other employees arrived and prepared for opening. Sarah's colleague Jennifer whispered about seeing a Rolls-Royce parked outside, indicating that they might have a particularly affluent customer today. Sarah simply nodded, more focused on ensuring that every piece of clothing was perfectly presented and that she was ready to provide excellent service, regardless of who walked through those doors. Little did she know that this particular Friday would test everything she believed about human dignity, social justice, and the power of standing up for what's right. The morning's peaceful routine was about to be shattered by an encounter that would reveal the true character of everyone involved and ultimately change the course of her life in ways she never could have imagined. At precisely 10:30, the boutique's crystal doors chimed as Victoria Ashworth swept into the store like a hurricane disguised in designer clothing. Her perfectly coiffed platinum blonde hair caught the morning light, and her Hermes handbag swung with practiced elegance as she surveyed the space with the calculating gaze of someone accustomed to owning whatever room she entered. The 42-year-old socialite had inherited her fortune rather than earned it, a fact that had shaped her worldview in ways that were immediately apparent to anyone who spent more than 5 minutes in her presence. Victoria's entrance commanded attention, not through charm or charisma, but through an aura of entitlement that seemed to precede her like an expensive perfume. Her stiletto heels clicked against the marble floor with military precision as she moved past several displays, without acknowledging the greeting from the store manager. Her eyes, cold and appraising, scanned the merchandise as if she were evaluating assets rather than admiring fashion. This was a woman who had never been told no, never been made to wait, and never been forced to consider anyone's feelings but her own. Sarah approached with her characteristic warm smile, genuinely pleased to have the opportunity to help someone find something beautiful. She had no way of knowing that Victoria had already formed an opinion about her based solely on her appearance and assumed social status. To Victoria, Sarah represented everything she looked down upon: the working class, the people who serve rather than were served, the individuals she considered fundamentally different from herself. The collision of these two worlds began with deceptive politeness. Sarah offered her assistance with genuine enthusiasm, explaining the new collection and highlighting pieces that might interest such an obviously discerning customer. Victoria listened with barely concealed impatience, her responses clipped and dismissive. She made it clear through her body language and tone that she considered this interaction a necessary inconvenience rather than a pleasant shopping experience. As Sarah guided Victoria through the store, explaining the craftsmanship behind various pieces and sharing styling suggestions, Victoria's mask of civility began to slip. She interrupted Sarah mid-sentence, corrected her pronunciation of designer names with condescending precision, and made subtle comments about Sarah's own appearance that cut like surgical incisions. The toxic dynamic was establishing itself with each passing moment, though Sarah continued to maintain her professionalism and genuine desire to help. Victoria selected several high-end pieces to try on, each worth more than Sarah's monthly salary. As they moved toward the fitting rooms, Victoria began testing boundaries, making increasingly personal comments about Sarah's background, education, and presumably limited life experience. She spoke as if Sarah were invisible, discussing her with a friend on the phone about how difficult it was to find competent help these days, how some people simply weren't cut out for positions requiring sophistication and taste. The fitting room sessions became a masterclass in psychological warfare. Victoria emerged from each outfit change with criticism not just for the clothing, but for Sarah's ability to understand her needs. She questioned Sarah's knowledge of fashion, her understanding of quality, and her capacity to serve someone of Victoria's caliber. Each comment was delivered with the practiced cruelty of someone who had perfected the art of making others feel small without technically crossing legal lines. Sarah found herself in an impossible position. Her job required her to maintain customer service excellence regardless of how she was treated, but Victoria seemed determined to push every boundary of human decency. The situation escalated with each interaction, Victoria's voice growing louder and more demanding, attracting the attention of other customers who began to witness the unfolding drama with a mixture of fascination and discomfort. What neither woman realized was that every word, every gesture, every moment of this encounter was being observed by Marcus Wellington from his office overlooking the sales floor. His jaw tightened as he watched the scene unfold, recognizing the familiar pattern of someone using their wealth as a weapon against those they perceived as powerless. This was exactly the kind of behavior that went against everything he had tried to build in his stores, and he found himself facing a decision that would define not just his business philosophy, but his moral character. The breaking point arrived with the stunning force of a summer storm. Victoria had spent nearly 40 minutes tormenting Sarah under the guise of shopping, and her patience for maintaining even a thin veneer of civility had completely evaporated. Standing in front of a three-way mirror wearing a $4,000 evening gown, Victoria turned to face Sarah with the cold precision of an executioner preparing to deliver a final blow. Her voice, loud enough to carry throughout the boutique's marble halls, cut through the gentle classical music like a blade through silk. Victoria began her assault with calculated cruelty, telling Sarah that she clearly didn't belong in a store of this caliber, that her lack of breeding and education was painfully obvious to anyone with sophistication. She declared that Sarah's presence actually diminished the boutique's reputation, that customers like herself shouldn't have to endure service from someone so clearly beneath their social status. Her words grew more vicious with each sentence, attacking not just Sarah's professional competence, but her worth as a human being. The other customers in the store stopped their shopping, some turning away in embarrassment, while others watched with the horrible fascination people reserve for witnessing cruelty. Sarah stood frozen, her face burning with humiliation as Victoria continued her verbal assault. Every instinct told her to defend herself, to walk away, to refuse to endure this treatment. But her need for employment and her ingrained professionalism kept her rooted to the spot, absorbing each insult like physical blows. Victoria's tirade reached new levels of cruelty as she began making assumptions about Sarah's personal life, suggesting that someone like her probably came from poverty, probably had no education, probably had no prospects beyond serving her betters in stores like this. She spoke about Sarah as if she were examining a specimen under a microscope, dissecting her presumed failures and limitations with scientific detachment. The psychological violence was comprehensive and devastating, designed to strip away every shred of dignity and self-worth. Sarah's hands began to shake as Victoria continued her assault, moving from professional incompetence to personal inadequacy with ruthless efficiency. She suggested that Sarah should be grateful for any job at all, that someone of her obvious limitations should count themselves lucky to work in such an establishment, even in such a menial capacity. The words were chosen with the precision of someone who understood exactly how to inflict maximum psychological damage. The boutique's atmosphere had transformed from elegant sanctuary to gladiatorial arena, with Victoria as the aggressor and Sarah as the unwilling victim. Other employees watched helplessly, knowing that intervening could cost them their jobs, while customers either fled the uncomfortable scene or remained frozen by the social awkwardness of witnessing such public humiliation. The beautiful space that had been designed to celebrate luxury and refinement had become a stage for the worst aspects of human nature. Victoria's voice grew increasingly shrill as she demanded that Sarah apologize for wasting her valuable time, for presuming to serve someone so far above her station, for existing in a space where she clearly didn't belong. She wanted complete submission, total acknowledgement of her superiority, and absolute validation of her right to treat others as disposable objects rather than human beings. Her behavior revealed the ugly truth about how some people use wealth and status as weapons against those they perceive as powerless. In the midst of this psychological torture, Sarah found herself questioning everything about her life, her choices, her worth. Victoria's words, delivered with such certainty and venom, began to feel like truths rather than attacks. The isolation of being publicly humiliated while surrounded by witnesses who did nothing created a special kind of psychological wound, one that cut deeper than any physical injury could have managed. What Victoria didn't realize was that her performance was being watched by someone who had the power to end it, someone who had seen enough to make a judgment about her character and her right to continue shopping in his establishment. Marcus Wellington had witnessed every moment of the degradation, and his decision about how to respond was already forming in his mind with crystal clarity. Marcus Wellington had seen enough. Rising from his chair with the quiet authority of a man who had built an empire through decisive action, he moved toward the door of his observation office with purposeful strides. Every step carried the weight of moral certainty. Every breath fueled his determination to right a wrong that had gone far beyond the bounds of acceptable behavior. His face showed no emotion, but his eyes burned with the kind of righteous anger that comes from witnessing cruelty inflicted on the innocent. As Marcus descended the spiral staircase that led from his private office to the main sales floor, Victoria was reaching the crescendo of her verbal assault. Her voice echoed through the boutique as she declared that Sarah was exactly the kind of person who gave retail establishments a bad reputation, that her obvious lack of breeding and education made her unsuitable for any position requiring contact with discerning clientele. She demanded that Sarah acknowledge her superiority, that she admit her inadequacy, that she accept her place in the social hierarchy with appropriate humility. Sarah stood trembling, tears streaming down her face as Victoria's words cut deeper with each syllable. The psychological torture had achieved its intended effect, breaking down her defenses and leaving her feeling worthless and ashamed. Other customers continued to watch in horrified silence, while employees remained paralyzed by their fear of confronting someone with such obvious wealth and power. The beautiful boutique had become a theater of cruelty, with Victoria as the lead performer in a show that revealed the darkest aspects of human nature. The moment Marcus stepped onto the sales floor, the atmosphere shifted subtly. His presence commanded attention without requiring announcement, his quiet authority filling the space like morning light dispelling shadows. He moved through the boutique with measured steps, his gaze fixed on the scene unfolding near the fitting rooms. Customers who recognized him as the owner stepped aside respectfully, sensing that something significant was about to occur. Victoria, completely absorbed in her performance of dominance and cruelty, remained oblivious to the approaching reckoning. She continued her verbal assault on Sarah, now demanding that management be called to remove such incompetent staff from positions they clearly couldn't handle. Her voice carried the absolute confidence of someone who had never faced consequences for their actions, who had always been insulated by wealth from the moral judgments of others. As Marcus drew closer, he could see the devastating effect Victoria's words were having on Sarah. The young woman's shoulders shook with suppressed sobs, her face flushed with humiliation and pain. This was exactly the kind of situation he had sworn would never happen in his establishments, the kind of abuse of power that went against everything he believed about human dignity and respect. His decision about how to handle the situation had crystallized into absolute clarity. Marcus positioned himself where he could observe the full scope of Victoria's behavior, taking in every detail of her cruelty for future reference. He watched as she gestured dismissively at Sarah, speaking about her as if she were an object rather than a person. He noted the way other customers and employees had been frozen into inaction by the social dynamics of wealth and power, how Victoria's status had created a bubble of protection around her unacceptable behavior. The final straw came when Victoria began making threats about her influence in the community, suggesting that she could have Sarah fired from any retail position in the city. She spoke about her connections, her social network, her ability to destroy the careers of people who displeased her. This was no longer just rudeness or snobbery. It was systematic intimidation designed to crush someone's spirit and eliminate their ability to earn a living. Marcus had heard enough. With the calm precision of a surgeon making a critical incision, he began walking directly toward the confrontation, his footsteps silent on the marble floor, but his presence growing more commanding with each step. The time for observation had ended, and the moment for action had arrived. Everything Victoria thought she knew about power and privilege was about to be challenged by someone who understood both concepts far better than she ever would. Marcus Wellington's voice cut through Victoria's tirade with the precision of a master craftsman wielding his finest tool. Clear, calm, and carrying the unmistakable authority of absolute ownership, his words brought an immediate halt to the psychological torture that had been unfolding in his boutique. Every person in the store turned toward the sound, recognizing instinctively that something momentous was about to occur. The classical music seemed to fade into background silence as Marcus stepped fully into the confrontation that had been building for the past hour. Victoria spun around with the irritated expression of someone interrupted mid-performance, her mouth already forming words of complaint about the disruption. Her eyes swept over Marcus with the dismissive assessment she reserved for store employees, seeing only another obstacle to her complete domination of the situation. She had no idea that she was looking at the man who controlled not just her immediate shopping experience, but her future access to one of the city's most exclusive retail establishments. Her ignorance would prove to be both profound and costly. Marcus introduced himself with understated elegance, his voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had never needed to raise it to command respect. He explained that he was the owner of Elegance Boutique, that he had witnessed the entire interaction from his office, and that he wanted to personally address what had just occurred. His words were measured and professional, but underneath lay the steel of absolute moral certainty and the power to enforce his vision of how human beings should treat one another. The transformation in the boutique's atmosphere was immediate and dramatic. Other customers who had been witnessing the scene in uncomfortable silence suddenly straightened with anticipation, sensing that justice might finally be served. Employees who had felt helpless to intervene began to gather at a respectful distance, their expressions mixing hope with nervous excitement. Sarah looked up through her tears with confusion and growing hope, unable to fully process what was happening but sensing that the nightmare might be ending. Victoria's initial reaction was one of confident aggression, her voice taking on the imperious tone she used when dealing with subordinates who had forgotten their place. She began to complain about the quality of service she had received, about Sarah's obvious incompetence, about the declining standards that allowed such unsuitable people to work in establishments that catered to discerning clientele. Her words tumbled out with the practiced fluency of someone accustomed to having their complaints immediately validated and acted upon. Marcus listened to Victoria's litany of grievances with the patient attention of a judge hearing testimony, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts or intentions. He allowed her to speak without interruption, giving her enough rope to thoroughly demonstrate the depth of her entitlement and cruelty. Every word she spoke only strengthened his resolve and provided additional justification for the action he was about to take. Her continued attacks on Sarah, even in his presence, revealed a character so thoroughly corrupted by privilege that redemption seemed impossible. As Victoria continued her complaints, Marcus began to speak with the quiet authority of someone delivering a final verdict. He explained that he had indeed witnessed everything that had occurred, but his assessment of the situation differed dramatically from hers. He praised Sarah's professionalism, her patience, her genuine attempts to provide excellent service despite facing unprecedented rudeness and cruelty. His words were a balm to Sarah's wounded spirit and a stark contradiction to everything Victoria believed about her own behavior and its justification. Marcus then turned his attention fully to Victoria, his voice maintaining its calm professionalism while delivering words that would shatter her assumptions about power and consequence. He explained that her behavior was completely unacceptable in his establishment, that the way she had treated his employee violated every principle his business was built upon. He spoke about dignity, respect, and the fundamental humanity that connected all people regardless of their economic circumstances. His words carried the weight of moral authority, backed by absolute power to enforce his standards. The boutique had become a courtroom, with Marcus as both judge and jury, Victoria as the defendant, and Sarah as the victim whose dignity was being restored through the application of justice. The other witnesses to the morning's events watched with fascination as the social dynamics that had seemed so fixed and immutable began to shift with tectonic force. Power was revealing its true nature, and privilege was about to meet its match in the form of principle backed by greater privilege. The moment of reckoning arrived with the swift finality of a guillotine blade. Marcus Wellington's voice remained perfectly controlled as he delivered the words that would strip away Victoria's assumptions about her untouchable status in the world of luxury retail. He informed her, with crystal clarity, that her behavior had been so egregious, so fundamentally contrary to the values his establishment represented, that she was no longer welcome in Elegance Boutique. The ban was immediate, permanent, and non-negotiable. Security would escort her from the premises, and her photograph would be distributed to all luxury retailers in their network with a detailed account of her conduct. Victoria's face underwent a transformation that was both fascinating and terrifying to witness. The color drained from her perfectly made-up features as the full implications of Marcus's words began to penetrate her consciousness. This was not a scenario her privileged existence had prepared her for. Never in her 42 years had anyone with real power told her that her money could not buy her way out of consequences for her behavior. The shock was so profound that for several moments, she seemed unable to form coherent words. When Victoria's voice finally returned, it came as a shriek of disbelief and outrage that echoed through the marble halls like the cry of a wounded animal. She began making threats about her connections, her influence, her ability to destroy his business through her social network. She promised lawsuits, boycotts, and social ostracism that would ruin him and his establishment. Her words came in a torrent of fury and panic as she realized that her usual weapons of intimidation were useless against someone who possessed both greater wealth and unshakable moral conviction. Marcus listened to her threats with the serene patience of someone who had anticipated every possible response and found none of them concerning. When she paused for breath, he calmly explained that her social connections held no power over someone who had built his empire through integrity rather than inheritance. He mentioned, almost casually, that several of her supposed allies were actually his personal friends who would be very interested to learn about her behavior toward his employee. The network she thought would protect her would actually serve as the mechanism for her social downfall. The other customers in the boutique watched this reversal of fortune with the captivated attention usually reserved for theatrical performances. They were witnessing something rare and powerful, the moment when privilege met principle and lost decisively. Several of them began recording the interaction with their phones, recognizing that they were documenting a moment that would become legend in certain social circles. The story of Victoria Ashworth's spectacular downfall would be told and retold for years to come. Sarah stood frozen in amazement as she watched her tormentor's complete collapse. The woman who had seemed so powerful, so untouchable, so certain of her superiority, was being systematically dismantled by someone who combined wealth with wisdom and power with principle. It was like watching a masterclass in how true strength revealed itself, not through cruelty to the vulnerable, but through protection of those who needed defending. Her tears, which had flowed from pain and humiliation, now came from relief and gratitude. Marcus signaled to security with a subtle gesture, and two professional guards appeared as if summoned by magic. They approached Victoria with respectful but firm authority, making it clear that her departure was not optional. She looked around desperately, seeking allies or escape routes, but found only faces reflecting various degrees of satisfaction at seeing justice served. The isolation she had created through years of treating others as beneath her consideration was now complete and absolute. Victoria's final moments in the boutique revealed the full pathology of her character. Unable to accept responsibility or show any recognition of wrongdoing, she continued to blame Sarah, Marcus, and society itself for failing to recognize her inherent superiority. Her parting words were a stream of vitriol that only served to validate every decision Marcus had made about her character and her fitness to shop in his establishment. She was escorted through the crystal doors that would never open for her again, her designer heels clicking against marble for the last time. The silence that followed Victoria's departure was profound and pregnant with meaning. The boutique's atmosphere began to restore itself slowly, like a garden after a violent storm, with the beauty and elegance of the space reasserting itself now that the toxic presence had been removed. Customers began to move and speak again, their conversations inevitably focusing on what they had just witnessed. The story would spread through the city's social networks with the speed of wildfire, carrying lessons about power, privilege, and the inevitable consequences of treating others without basic human dignity. The transformation that followed Victoria's departure was immediate and profound, as if a dark cloud had lifted from the boutique's elegant atmosphere. Marcus Wellington turned his attention to Sarah, who stood trembling with a complex mixture of relief, gratitude, and residual shock from her ordeal. His voice, which had carried such authority when addressing Victoria, now softened with genuine warmth and concern as he approached the young woman who had endured so much with such grace and professionalism. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder and spoke words that would echo in her memory for the rest of her life. Marcus told Sarah that her behavior throughout the entire ordeal had been exemplary, that her patience and professionalism in the face of unprecedented cruelty demonstrated the kind of character he valued above all else in his employees. He explained that what she had endured was not a reflection of any failing on her part, but rather a testament to her strength and dignity. His words began the process of healing the psychological wounds that Victoria's assault had inflicted, replacing shame with pride and self-doubt with validated self-worth. But Marcus's response went far beyond mere verbal comfort. He announced, to the amazement of everyone present, that he was promoting Sarah to the position of assistant manager, effective immediately, with a salary increase that would more than double her current income. He explained that someone who could maintain their integrity and compassion under such extreme pressure possessed exactly the qualities he needed in his leadership team. The promotion was not charity, but recognition of exceptional character revealed under the most challenging circumstances. The other employees erupted in spontaneous applause, their joy genuine and unrestrained. They had witnessed Sarah's ordeal and her grace throughout, and her vindication felt like justice restored to their world. Customers who had remained in the store after Victoria's departure added their congratulations, many approaching Sarah personally to express their admiration for how she had handled such a difficult situation. The boutique buzzed with positive energy as the morning's darkness was transformed into a celebration of human dignity and justice. Marcus took the opportunity to address everyone present, employees and customers alike, about the values that defined his business philosophy. He spoke about the importance of treating every person with respect regardless of their economic status, about the true meaning of luxury being found not in price tags, but in how human beings cared for one another. His impromptu speech became a masterclass in leadership and moral clarity, inspiring everyone who heard it to reflect on their own behavior and values. Sarah's story spread beyond the boutique's walls with remarkable speed. Social media posts from customers who had witnessed the events went viral within hours, turning her into an unexpected symbol of dignity under pressure and the power of standing up for what's right. Job offers poured in from other retailers who wanted someone of her demonstrated character on their teams, though she chose to remain loyal to Marcus and the Elegance boutique family that had supported her when it mattered most. The incident became a case study in business schools about authentic leadership and the long-term value of treating employees with respect and dignity. Marcus's decisive action in defense of his employee generated enormous positive publicity for his business, proving that doing the right thing was not only morally correct, but also commercially wise. The boutique saw increased foot traffic as people came to shop at the establishment known for its principled stand against cruelty and discrimination. Years later, Sarah would rise to become the general manager of the entire Elegance boutique chain, her career trajectory forever altered by that terrible and wonderful morning when she learned that dignity cannot be purchased, but it also cannot be taken away from those who truly possess it. She implemented training programs that taught other employees how to maintain their professionalism while seeking help when faced with abusive customers, ensuring that no one else would have to endure what she had experienced alone. Victoria Ashworth faded into social obscurity, her behavior that morning having been captured and shared so widely that her reputation never recovered. The woman who had believed her wealth made her untouchable learned that character matters more than capital, and that true power lies not in the ability to hurt others, but in the strength to protect them. The boutique stood as a testament to the idea that business success and moral principle were not opposing forces, but complementary aspects of building something truly valuable that would endure long after the profits were counted and the seasons changed.